What if I told you that no strategy, however advanced it is, will outperform this one system? And no, this one system is not a marketing or sales system. It's a system that you're likely taking for granted, but it holds the keys to your success. One of my favorite quotes is from James Clear, who said, "We don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems." Now, automatically we think about really practical, tangible systems, but there's a system that we often forget that's really running the show, as I say, has the keys to your success, and that is our nervous system. Our nervous system is essentially the operating system to our body. It's the part of us that connects the body and the brain. Now, I'm not going to get into the science of this, but I want to talk about how to increase our capacity and regulate, and finally a tool that has completely changed mine and my client's life. Now, what if I said to you there's a level of success that feels totally unsafe to your nervous system, and it's that feeling of unsafety that's keeping you stuck at the level at which you're at. Now, I learned this the hard way, and I'm still learning it, to be honest. For most of my life, I had this glass ceiling with my income. And every time I hit this ceiling, I would find a way to sneakily self-sabotage. And here's the thing about how our nervous system operates. It is quite sneaky. It flies under the radar. So for me, every time I would have a really good month and hit my income ceiling, I would find a way to get myself back into what was safe to my nervous system. For my nervous system, what was safe was graft, hustle, struggle, stress. Even though it's unwanted, to me, it was safe. Now, this is how fucked up this can all be. And the way I would self-sabotage was super sneaky. It was over-investing. And that was a sign of a really dysregulated nervous system for me. And I didn't have the awareness or maturity to see that. And in the last 6 months or so, I've really started to break through that income ceiling, actually smashing through it and doubling that income ceiling in February this year, because I brought awareness to the pattern, but also I increased my capacity in my nervous system and helped my nervous system feel safe at these higher levels of success. So I want to talk today about how I've increased the capacity of my nervous system, how I self-regulate, and this one magic tool, which I'll save to the end. So one thing that's been really, what has unlocked a huge amount of success for me is feeling all the feelings that come with increased success. So I come from a corporate background, a startup background, where hustle and grind and working the long hours was rewarded. And to my nervous system, that is safe, that is known. And perhaps you can relate to this. I also come from a family where, again, it was almost a badge of honor how hard we worked and how stressed we were. And it kind of got me quite far. Like, society rewards hard work in the traditional sense. But when you're an entrepreneur, it is very, very limiting, and it certainly was for me. Now, when I asked myself, how would I be if I had already reached my income goals, which would double what my income ceiling was, how would I be? What came up was I'd be relaxed, my calendar would change, I would have more space. But every time I lent into that, I would find a way to keep myself busy. And I was on this cycle for years, really. And I was so sick of it that I really wanted to break it. And the way that I broke it was by feeling the feelings that came with this increased success. There's an amazing model called Be, Do, Have. First you must be, then you must do to get to the having. We often think of it the other way around. Now that's a video for another day, but so my record month came February this year, and it was a month that I worked the least because I trained my nervous system that it was safe to sit in what was actually very uncomfortable for me, which was resting, relaxing. I remember times when I was lying on my hammock, which is possibly one of my favorite places in the world, chilling out, and I could notice my nervous system really feeling agitated. My mind saying, you've got to work, Joel, you've got to work, you've got to work. And that awareness, I had the ability to have awareness without getting swept up in the content of those thoughts. I was able to be the witness, to be the observer. So I noticed these thoughts whilst I was lying in the hammock. And whilst I was lying in the hammock, I was then just noticing, letting go, noticing and letting go, noticing that letting go. And that is the first way of increasing your capacity. It's containing the feeling, which isn't avoiding a feeling, it's containing the feeling whilst having it. It's a really important difference. So I was containing this feeling. I was feeling the discomfort of relaxing whilst containing it, whilst allowing it to flow through me. And this increases our capacity. It trains our nervous system that these feelings are safe. So I was doing this whilst breathing deeply into my belly, big long exhales, noticing the thought, letting them go. So containment is the first way of increasing my capacity. The second is essentially doing hard, uncomfortable things. Now, for a lot of my life, and this was kind of born out of my old patterns, but I can see the benefit of now. For a lot of my life, on Friday, I would do what I call my dark place workout, where every Friday I would go to my dark place, and it's essentially the place where my body wants to give up, where the lactic acid will be flooding my muscles, my lungs will be burning, and my mind would want to give up. And the point of taking myself there is to train my body that I have more capacity, train my mind that I have more capacity by focusing on one of the 4 controllables: the breath, the body posture, self-talk, and effort. And in doing that, in focusing one of the 4 controllables, I was able to then regulate and tell my nervous system, my body, that I had more, that I could be relaxed in this discomfort. I could be present to the discomfort. Essentially, I found the part of me that was bigger than the sensation itself, that was bigger than the discomfort. This is an amazing way to increase our capacity. We could do this with also cold water therapy, another great way. But the key is here, we don't jump into the cold water and go, because we're ultimately stressing our nervous system there. Instead, what we want to do is get into the cold water and really start to regulate, be present, find that part of you that is bigger than the sensation. Another great way of regulating in this discomfort is breath work. Breath work's an amazing way to, again, increase our capacity. And there are some amazing guided breath works that I give my community to increase this capacity. One of my mentors, John Wineland, said the other day, there is no transformation without the breath. There is no transformation without the breath. And it's so true. You cannot transform without mastering your breath, because change is risky to our nervous system, and the only tool we really have, the best tool we really have in regulating in that change, in sort of calming ourselves down in that perceived risk to our body, is using our breath, longer exhales. Another great way of increasing my capacity is, again, doing scary things, kind of stretching myself. Now, there's a difference between stretch and stress, because one of my habits, one of my upper limiting habits that kept me from high levels of success was actually stressing myself. You know, I've seen such benefit of investing in myself in pushing my limits, in challenging myself. But when it comes from a dysregulated place, or when it comes from the ego, it leads to stressing yourself. And I've invested in myself way more than I should have, and it created stress in my body. And regulating from that really high place of stress that you're just so wildly outside of your comfort zone is very, very hard, and it can really throw you for quite some time. And I have had those experiences. So there's a really sweet spot where you are stretched, not stressed, because in that stretch you are able to calm yourself down, you are able to regulate. It's the same with accessing states of flow. There's a sweet spot with flow where it's not easy, because you don't enter a state of flow if it's easy. There's a stretch, there's just outside of your comfort zone. When it's in that sweet spot, it's very easy to access that state of flow. If it's wildly outside of your comfort zone, you can't access that state of flow because you're hypervigilant, you're in this fight or flight, and you've gone way past what you're able to regulate. So doing hard things, but finding that sweet spot, which is just beyond your comfort zone, not in that stress. So stretch versus stress. So that's how I increase my capacity, doing hard things whilst regulating. Now, the ways I regulate, and of course this isn't limited, this isn't all of the ways to regulate, these are just my personal favourite ways to regulate. And I'll start with the easiest and quickest to do. So the first is a great tool called ABC, and I learned this from another mentor called Mark Walsh. And A stands for awareness. It always starts with awareness, so bringing awareness into your body. B stands for balance. I love doing this by finding a posture where you lean back, you lean forward, you lean left, you lean right, and let your body just pivot and find its center point. And then C stands for core relaxation. So I like to do that, imagine breathing in, and as I breathe out, just relaxing my face, relaxing my tummy, relaxing my belly, all the way down to my core. Now that takes 5 seconds, and that's an amazing way to down-regulate ourselves. But sometimes we are stressed or triggered beyond what can be regulated with that simple 5-second breath. So we need more than that. So other ways I regulate is if something's really triggered me and I really need to move an emotion, I don't have the time to sit with it and to self-soothe, just a short shake, a couple minutes of shaking, a bit of qigong, where you're sort of tapping yourself and slapping out any, almost like wiping off the stress, wiping off the stories. This is a really great way to rapidly transform your state so you're more calm and more present. So shaking, dancing, as I say, tapping, qigong, again, really quick and easy way to self-regulate. Other ways, my favorite is getting into nature. It's why every single day I go for a walk in nature. I start the day and I find a spot just up here. I sit down and I just take a few moments in stillness and I allow nature to do its thing. Just listening to the birds, listening to the sea, feeling the breeze on your skin. This is just a way to lap in the abundance of nature. Nature is all giving and it's never ending. It's infinite in what it can do for us. And it's just the most powerful way to regulate. If I feel really dysregulated, I'll have a dip in the ocean, I'll get my feet in the sand, and I'll spend longer in the ocean, longer in nature. If I'm really out of whack, it probably needs a whole day. But often just a quick walk in nature really just shifts my state. I can't talk about regulation without mindfulness and without breath work. That kind of goes without saying. So every morning I personally meditate for an hour at a local monastery, and it's just an amazing way to down-regulate, to be calm and to enter that state of deep presence. There are many more: self-soothing, baths, journaling, but just my favorites are, time in nature, the ABC, dancing, shaking, and the final one is finding a community. one of the quickest ways to regulate is actually be around someone who is grounded, who is very regulated. My wife says to me all the time, it's so nice just to be around your calming presence because you just slow me down. I find I do a lot of work on my nervous system, so I'm very grounded, very calm. Of course, not always like that. I've got 2 young girls, so that would be impossible. But being around someone who's grounded, who is centered, who can actually co-regulate. And if you're really dysregulated, being around a lot of people will actually down-regulate you and allow yourself to get more grounded and present. So those are some of my favorite ways of regulating myself. Now, I wanted to speak finally to one of my favorite tools, and it is so simple, but it is wildly profound in its application. And it's a model I learned from another mentor called Alistair Gray, and it's called ACT. Now, this can apply to anything and everything. And when you really understand this, you have the ticket to a phenomenal life and to all the success that you want. You know, Viktor Frankl has this famous quote, which really talks to this model. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom to choose, and in our freedom to choice lies our freedom and growth. I think I messed it up a little bit there, but you kind of get the picture. Stimulus, response, choice. Choice equals freedom. What this model does is it increases that gap between stimulus and response. It increases our ability, it allows us to be the witness and to then consciously choose our response. So A stands for awareness. Life is a game of awareness, and I'm sure you've heard this, but for me, I can't hear it enough. You know, I need to be reminded of this every single day. It's why I meditate for an hour every single morning, to increase my ability to be in awareness. Are you aware? A beautiful question I ask myself multiple times a day. So sit in that seat of awareness. Awareness, it starts there. Awareness of my body, how am I feeling? Where's tension? What are my thoughts telling myself? Now, I have a rule of thumb that if I am feeling low quality emotions, I do the opposite of my thoughts. I use my emotions as a barometer for the quality of my thinking. So if I'm feeling stressed or worried, I notice my thoughts and I do the opposite, which brings me on to C, choice, create. This is where we can change. This is where we can choose a different pattern, choose a different response, be responsive, not reactive. This is the choice, the response. So again, what I do here is I lead with my body. I am a big believer that if I lead with my body, my mind follows, and it happens time and time and time again. It is so much easier to notice that you're feeling stressed, ignore all your thoughts, move your body, shake, dance, whatever it takes, and then trust the thoughts that come from this new empowered state. Sometimes it's just as simple as shape-shifting into a more powerful version of yourself, choosing that embodiment and trusting that the thoughts that come from that new embodiment, that new shape that you've created and shifted into, are going to be far more empowering. And I've done this now thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of times in the last few years, and every time I do, it gives me more faith in this model. This has been the model that's completely changed my life and so many of my clients' lives. It's about remembering that firstly, it starts awareness, creating separation from the stimulus, from the content of the situation, choosing our embodiment, leading with that and trusting that the mind will follow, that when we trust in the present moment, when we trust what embodiment is needed for the present moment, i.e. if it needs action, going into that, maybe a fire breath, maybe that embodiment is needed for the present moment, and trusting that if we lead with our body, the mind will follow. So I hope this has been useful. This is really where the magic is, people. And this takes life learning, and it takes working with coaches who are able to bring awareness to patterns. Like, I wouldn't have had awareness of this self-sabotaging pattern if I hadn't worked with my coach. This is why I'll always be working with a coach, because it is very hard to disentangle ourselves from these thoughts, these patterns that are deeply wired into our nervous system. But without doing it, we will always be locked into a limited life. We will always remain stuck. So this is where the magic is, people. This is where the real work is. Sending you so much love, and I hope this has been helpful. And go ahead and subscribe if it has, and share it with a friend, and do all that good stuff. All right, love ya.